point of view, you've just shot your most powerful weapons at the Warlord Titan and cleared half its void shields. Then it begins to take aim at you. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where most of the time we try and provide some semi-intelligent analysis of competitive 40k, but sometimes we're all about just smashing big titans together and see which one breaks first. In this video I thought we'd try and answer a question that I had: which of the big Forge World titans is the strongest for the points? We've got a titan tournament coming up, 8 very fancy and expensive hunks of resin adamantium walk in, but only one may leave. Obviously, this is a slightly silly hypothetical contest. I wouldn't take it too seriously in terms of game balance or anything, and as a lot of these cost 1500 points or more, most of them aren't really ones that you'd be considering in normal 2000 point games anyway. In terms of selecting our contenders, I thought we'd try and aim for Titan class models, basically walker choices from Forge World that cost a whole ton of points, the cheapest one out of this selection being 850 points for the Tyranid Bio-Titan. All the rules here are for the Imperial Armor Compendium. The contest for which titans beat each other will be on a per point basis, otherwise I can tell you with absolutely no calculation that the winner will be the Warlord Titan. It costs 5,500 points, so we'll just flatten anything that gets in its way. It'll be interesting to see if it can take out its points cost in smaller titans though. For each battle, the units will be equipped with the best weapons that they can take to kill their foe. Everyone's going to be loading up on the Volcano Lances and Melter weapons, and we've got a 3-round elimination style tournament with just one winner. For the fights, we'll work out the average damage dealt per phase of each titan fighting each other. If it matters, then we'll have 2 phases of shooting before allowing 1 combat phase. Pretty much all of the Titan's guns are really quite long ranged, and that feels about the right sort of balance for what you could expect on an actual battlefield in 40k. Perhaps a couple of shooting phases, then charging in, when taking into account you might be screened by other models. Just for the purposes of the guns, we'll treat the first round of fire at less than 24 inches, then less than 12 inches on the second round for where it matters, so pretty much most guns are going to be at optimal effectiveness. Here we have our mini Titan tournament and the contenders. We've got the Eldar Phantom Titan and Revenant Titan, the 4 big Imperial or Chaos ones, the Warhound, Warbringer, Reaver and Warlord, and then a couple of entries for the Xenos, the Tyranid Hierophant Bio-Titan, and the Tau Empire Taunar Supremacy Armor. Perhaps some near misses with the Necron Seraptic Heavy Construct and the Orc Stomper, both weighing in at a fair few points less than most of these competitors though. I wanted to keep this one focused on the really big stuff, so that's why I chose this 8. Let's get started then, and we'll start off at the very top of the list and work our way down. For our first contender we have the Warbringer Nemesis Titan, 3,800 points of Imperial Might, aims to be a Titan that kills other Titans, so hopefully in with a good shot here, and if you happen to want to pick up one from Forge World, be prepared to hand over more than £800 or $1,200. The stat line on these things are ridiculous. It's got 100 wounds with a 2+ save and toughness 8. For weapon selections we're going to be taking the Reaver Melter Cannons for its arms, strength 16 weapons with damage 12 within 24 inches and 2d6 shots, and also a mighty Nemesis Volcano Cannon. A lot of Titans are also protected by void shields as well. This guy has 6. Basically they count as individual things that you need to gun out the way before you can actually target the main Titan. Each one has 3 wounds, but if you shoot one dead, then the rest of the damage is wasted, so they're quite good against tanking damage from high value shots, certainly a formidable opponent. Squaring off against him we have the Eldar Phantom Titan, the larger of the 2 Eldar ones. Compared with the other races' similar sized mechs, they're far more agile, moving quickly and nimbly around the battlefield, and abnormally hard to kill for their flimsy looking size due to being constructed entirely of wraithbone. That rule manifests in this thing having a mighty toughness of 9, and also 60 wounds with a 3+ save for 3,000 points. It doesn't have any Imperial Void Shields, but it does have a 4+ invul save innately for distortion fields, and its primary weapon will be the D-Bombards, each of them getting 4 shots at strength 16 damage 8, with a good chance to deal an extra 3 mortals as well. When battle is joined, the Warbringer hits insanely hard. The Ardex Defensor Maulers do 4 wounds on average. Its Anvilus anti-air batteries are completely wasted as they can't shoot things without fly, though the enormous damage results of the Volcano Cannon and Melter Cannons really do a lot more work, an average of 20 wounds out of the Volcano Cannon and 37 out of the Melter Cannons. You just can't really argue with 46 shots that hit at strength 16 and damage 12. Overall it adds up to 61 wounds, just 1 more than the Phantom Titan has, so 102% damage, though when weighted for the points disparity, the Warbringer comes down to 80% damage overall. When striking back, the Phantom Titan's fairly decent damage is really hamstrung by those void shields. The D-bombards are fairly efficient at killing them with those mortal wounds, but even so, with a full round of shooting, you've only just cleared the 6 void shields before actually taking aim at the 100 wound body. On the first round, just on average, you've got 98 wounds remaining, and then with the D-bombards doing around 44 wounds per turn, average numbers would say you've got a little bit more than 2 rounds more worth of shooting to bring down the Warbringer. That's just over 3 rounds overall to kill the entire thing, equating for 32% damage per turn, though that does increase a little bit to 40% once you've waited for points. Either way though, it's a very solid victory for the Warbringer, casting down the Eldar Phantom Titan. In our next pair we have 2 Imperial Titans, the Warhound facing off against the Reaver. The Warhound is the lightest class of Titans, 2000 points, and is more used for a scout role. They're really quite fast with a 20-inch move. They're still pretty tough with 50 wounds, a 2+ save, and 2 void shields, and it does cost a fair bit less than the previous 2 Titans that we've seen at only 2000 points. Weapons wise, it really is quite close between a lot of the choices. The turbo laser destructors are solidly in the lead against the main Titan's bodies, they are a little bit worse against the void shields. Overall, I think it works out that just taking dual destructors are the best choice, though the plasma blast gun and the inferno gun aren't all that far behind either. Facing off against the Warhound is the mighty Reaver, a mid-grade Titan this one, sort of a halfway between the enormous Warlord and the faster, agile Warhound. This guy's a bit more of a main battle line one. He weighs in at 3000 points, has 4 void shields to protect him, and mounts 3 Titan class weapon systems, 2 side guns that will also take as melter cannons like the Warbringer, and also the Apocalypse missile launcher, unfortunately a little bit out of place when trying to fight Titans. He's a little bit tougher than the Warhound as well, going up to a big 70 wounds with that 2+ save. In battle we have the Warhound striking first. For the first round of shooting, the turbo laser destructor fire is entirely absorbed by the void shields, on average only flattening 3 of them, and when they do get to strike at the body they'll be doing 28 wounds per turn after. With the remaining void shield and the other 70 wounds remaining, that's almost 3 more rounds needed to kill the Reaver, which means that if you have an equivalent number of points cost, then you'll do around about 39% damage overall once you've waited for the Reaver costing 1000 points more. The Reaver hits back really hard though, the Apocalypse missile launcher doing a little bit to the void shields and having a small chance of collapsing one, but then as with the Warbringer, those twin melter cannons really do a massive amount of work. Between the Apocalypse launcher and the melter cannons, you pretty much exactly average full damage to the Warhound Titan, killing it 100% dead in 1 round of shooting, though as the Reaver costs 1000 points more, that does get weighted down to a 66% damage. Still though, a pretty solid victory for the Reaver, perhaps kind of to be expected if you're fighting a battle Titan against a more scout class one. That means that we've got our first semi-final on the go. After we've done the next knockout stage, we're going to be fighting the Nemesis Warbringer versus the Reaver. Next up, moving into the other half of the table, we have the Revenant Titan versus the mighty Warlord. The Revenant is the smaller of the 2 Eldar ones, 1500 points worth of Wraithbone might, and he does share really quite a lot of similar characteristics with the Phantom one. His toughness 9, and can take 2 pulsar weapons in both his hands. These strike at 6 shots and damage 4. He also has the 4+ invul save, but only 32 wounds for this smaller Titan. Though don't get me wrong, he's still a pretty big model as 40k goes. From Forge World, he'll still set you back about $400, and his points cost is still the best part of a standard army. All that pales into comparison against the sheer ridiculousness of the Warlord Titan though, the biggest and most expensive model in 40k right now, 5,500 points. That's sort of getting towards the price that you might pay for a very cheap used car, £1,250 or almost $2,000. As you might expect, the stats on this thing are truly ridiculous. It gets up to toughness 9, the same as the Eldar ones, has 120 wounds with a 2+ save, has 8 void shields to collapse before you even get there, and then is absolutely covered in guns. The top mounted weapons will take as laser blasters, each one more powerful than the turbo laser destructors that the Warhound's Titan carries, and that's before we get to the main armament in its arm mounted weapons, where we're taking 2 Bellicosa volcano cannons, each of which have 3d3 shots, strength 20 and damage 12. It's even got a couple of las cannons and defense maulers on top of that, and it even does a nice damage 5 when it steps on you. Admittedly though, all this might does cost a crazy amount of points, so let's see it in action. The Revenant Titan does put in a fair effort. The Cloudburst missiles are a little bit wasted against the Warhound, again doing a small amount of wounds to the void shields. The Revenant pulsars following up, clearing another 3.5 of them, so on average this thing should take down around about half the void shields in a full round of shooting. So overall that's 2 rounds to kill the void shields, But even once they're down, with that enormous 120 wound characteristic, you're still going to need a 6 round of shooting for one of these things to blow up a warlord, and with over 8 rounds to kill the thing, that's going to be 12% damage. The points weighting does come in pretty heavily though. You can get more than 3 revenants for one warlord, so that jumps up to 44. The warlord striking back though does make its presence felt. The laser blasters clock in at 19 wounds, the defensive las cannons and mauler do another 4 wounds between them, but of course the main event is the volcano cannons. They clock in at 40 wounds versus the revenants. In theory you should kill around about 2 of these, 63 wounds dealt out of the 32 that it normally has, but of course waiting for points brings it right down, and it's actually only a fairly narrow victory to the warlord titan, at least in terms of efficiency when dueling its peers. Raw might slightly prevails over the maneuverability and the flexibility of the Eldar. In the final first round match, we've got 2 Xenos Titans going head to head. First up, the Tyranid Hierophant Bio-Titan. Despite being an enormous threatening model, this one is the cheapest in points by a fair way this time, 850 points, and that gets you a 34 wound bug with toughness 8 and a 2+ save and a 5+ invul. And it does pack a couple of dire bio cannons, 8 shot, strength 10 and damage 3 weapons, really quite good for collapsing things like void shields. It also has the potential to use frenzied metabolism to get it +1 to its wound roll with its ranged attacks, though it does take a few mortal wounds for the expense. Finally, and kind of interestingly, it can transport little bugs, and it also seems to have the fly keyword for some reason. I don't know whether that's to represent it stepping over smaller things on those spindly legs of its. It'll be facing off against the Taunar, the KX-139 Supremacy armor. 1,000 points worth of what is essentially the Tau's equivalent of a Titan, an enormous battlesuit just covered in guns. It works out that taking the fusion eradicators on the arms are the best choice, and the heavy rail cannon array on the top. It is really quite close between the fusion eradicators and the tri-axis ion cannons, though the mortal wounds I think just puts it very slightly in the favour of the fusion. Again, no void shields but a 5+ invul, and one of these costs around about £300 or $500 from Forge World. When battle is joined, the Hierophant's dire bio cannons do a massive 14 wounds to the Taunar, though unfortunately the bioplasma is slightly out of range as per the rules of engagement. If it gets to fight 2 turns then it would get in range though. This one's nice and simple to calculate the damage of, as neither of them have those pesky void shields. It does 14 wounds out of the 30 to the Taunar, so 47% damage, and adjusting for points as it's a little bit cheaper, that goes up to 55. The Taunar puts a serious bit of effort in return. The heavy rail cannon and fusion eradicators do 16 wounds in total. The burst cannons are also very slightly out of range, though the smart missile systems chip in an extra wound or so. 52% damage overall, though that gets adjusted down because it's more expensive, so 44% damage. It's kind of close, though to be honest I think that the Hierophant would generally get the upper hand in subsequent rounds if it went to them. If it makes combat, it gets a bucket load of damage 6 attacks, and the bioplasma isn't actually too terrible. I forgot to use the frenzied metabolism rule on this one as well, which would have made a big difference, but the Hierophant won anyway. Now that's all the first round matches complete, so we have our 2 semi-finals, the Warbringer versus the Reaver, and then the Hierophant versus the Warlord. The Xenos Titans don't seem to be holding up quite as well, with 3 of them eliminated already. First up we have the Warbringer versus the Reaver then. The mighty Warbringer strikes with the defensive maulers first to collapse the void shields as quickly as possible. The melter cannon collapses the rest, and then the volcano cannon has a clear shot with 40 wounds damage dealt. Overall it's a straight one-shot kill for the Warbringer again, dealing 107% damage to the Reaver on average. But though the Reaver costs 3,000 points where this one costs 3,800, that gets adjusted down to 84% damage. Interestingly, the Warbringer does a little bit more damage per point than it does to against the Phantom Titan. The Reaver hits back with some kind of similar armament. The Apocalypse launcher doesn't really do much and just attempts to clear some void shields, and it strikes back with a bit of a mirror match in the melter cannons, another 78 wounds dealt, smashing through 5 void shields, or doing that crazy 78 wounds if they are collapsed. Despite the big melter, it is going to take the Reaver around about 2.3 rounds on average to kill the Warbringer, so only 42% damage there, not all that impressive, and even the points cost adjusting it up a bit only get it to 52. It's a victory for the Warbringer once more, and we have our first finalist. Next up though is the smallest Titan on the list versus the biggest, the Hierophant versus the Warlord, for who is the most efficient Titan. The Dire Biocannon is really quite efficient against the void shields. Having flat 3 damage is pretty much ideal for the job, and still wounds the Warlord Titan on 3s due to strength 10 against toughness 9. When they collapse, they'll be doing 14 wounds on average each turn, and if one Hierophant were to bring down the Warlord, it'd take 2 turns to fully collapse all the shields, and then another 8.6 rounds to kill the other 120 wounds. It does mean that the little Hierophant will be taking over 10 turns to kill the Warlord, a 9.4% damage ratio, but due to the fact that the Warlord is roughly worth 6 or 7 Hierophants, that gets adjusted up to 61% damage. I do quite like the image of 6 of these guys scuttling around, trying to kill the Warlord while it tries to smash them one by one. In return, the Warlord charges up all of its mighty guns. The laser blasters should around about kill one Hierophant at 33 wounds. The volcano cannon will probably massively overkill another with 53 wounds, and there'll be a little bit of damage from the defensors. Still though, even if all of those wounds are converted usefully, it's still not even quite killing 3 Hierophants, and again due to the Warlord being worth roughly 6 Hierophants, it actually comes out as less efficient in terms of damage. Waiting for points, it's really quite a clear win for the Hierophant versus the Warlord. 61% versus 41. Again, if the Hierophant gets closer, they'll do better with the Biospray and then combat. And once again, I managed to forget the extra +1 to wound roll that you can activate to make the Biocannon stronger. So that brings us to our final then. Who's the scariest Titan in our Titan deathmatch and the most efficient for the points? It's Warbringer versus Hierophant. Finally, this time I thought I'd actually remember the Dire Biocannon's +1 to wound rule. Activating the Frenzied Metabolism, it averages killing every single Void Shield in a single round of shooting, and then each round of shooting after that, it'll be around about 18 wounds dealt. So basically 1 wound to clear the shields, and a further 5.7 turns to kill the other 100 wounds, which means its average damage output is 11.6% of a Warbringer brought down, and when adjusting for the points disparity, that comes up to a big 67% damage. Not bad going there at all. When the Warbringer hits back though, it does have a couple of extra tools in the arsenal. The Melter Cannons average a crazy 62 wounds, the Volcano Cannons another 27, the Defensor Maulers 4, and weirdly enough the Anvilus Defense Battery, the anti-air guns mounted on the side, they can technically shoot this thing, as for some reason it does have the fly keyword. I am kind of genuinely unsure why it does have the fly keyword. It doesn't have wings as far as I can tell, but for whatever reason it can be shot by those guns, and they do contribute a fairly meaningful amount. Overall, the Warbringer does 100 wounds out of 34, so 294% damage there, which will be rounded down to 65.7%, just a little bit under the Hierophants. However, the mortal wounds taken from that Frenzied Metabolism rule do tip the balance slightly. These wounds won't get weighted for points between the two, because each Hierophant would also have to activate the Frenzied Metabolism and take more mortal wounds if there's more of them. This adds an extra 2 wounds per Hierophant, adding 6% to the average damage output, and tips the balance in the Warbringer's favour, 71% versus 67. It still does make sense for the Hierophant to trigger that rule though. If it doesn't, then it loses out on something like 20% extra damage output, so it would actually be far further behind if it didn't use the Frenzied Metabolism rule. Just because neither of them are actually dead from the first round of combat, I thought we would just quickly check what happens in round 2, seeing as I said, the Hierophant will get a bit stronger at close range. Both the Hierophant and Warbringer put into their middle brackets, all hitting on 4s with their ranged weapons. The Hierophant getting in range for the Bioplasma does tip the balance a little bit, but the Warbringer again still pulls very slightly further ahead, winning the fight after the second round with 126% damage dealt versus 119. What's interesting that it does tip the balance though is the difference between whether or not the Warbringer could fire those Anvilus defense batteries. As I said, I'm really quite confused as to why the Hierophant has the fly keyword, but it does seem to be its undoing in this particular matchup. I even checked in the FAQs to see if they'd taken it away in those, but they appear not to. I guess you guys can choose the victor. Officially it is the Warbringer Titan, but if you think that the Hierophant was done dirty by Games Workshop accidentally giving them a keyword that it shouldn't have, then I guess you can claim it's a victory for Mr. Biotitan here. Officially though, victory does go to the Warbringer. I guess that kind of does seem to live up to the lore. If they are often built to actually take down other Titans, then I guess it's kind of fun and appropriate that their rules should make them most efficient against the other Titan classes, and they do seem like they're an appropriate choice for winning this game. Obviously, there's kind of limited things that you can take away from just comparing 2 Titans in a vacuum to how they'd actually play in game, but the Void Shield special rule does seem really quite powerful if you're just going one-on-one. If you're forced to fire high damage weapons against them, it's going to make you so much less efficient. I think the Eldar Titans with their big primary weapons really weren't getting on very well with those, even if their 4+ invuls were also quite powerful. Otherwise, in actual real big games of 40k where you might actually use these things, I do feel that a fair few of these are slightly underwhelming against non-Titanic targets. Having a gun that fires 2d6 shots at damage 12 is all great against Titans, but that's going to be kind of wasted if you have to shoot it at something like a Rhino tank. Even the most efficient of these aren't really all that great compared with the Games Workshop super heavies. Things like a Knight Castellan I think would have absolutely dominated if we'd included those. I think it maybe speaks a fair bit that the Hierophant did one of the best on the list, and then still that's very very rarely included in any sort of competitive Tyranid list, even though at 850 points it is kind of feasible. And also bear in mind that the Tyranids, Tau and Eldar Titans can all access a fair few powerful special rules if they're supported, things like Marker Lights, Psychic Powers or Stratagems, and they could all be a lot more effective if buffed. The Imperial Titans are all a bit envious of that, they don't get their own special army to support them. Even something like getting a 6+ Feel No Pain from Catalyst from the Hive Mind discipline is really quite big for the Hierophants. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed a slightly silly little Titan tournament there. Victory comes to the Warlord Titan, but possibly only due to a copy-paste error with the fly word on the Hierophant. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. Is there anything that any of these could have done better to improve their chances? And have you ever seen any of these guys put in action on the table for real? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I usually tend to make 40k game related things, often a bit more slightly serious tactics videos, but it's good to do something a bit more experimental once in a while. Finally, if you've enjoyed the video, I would just like to briefly mention the Auspex Tactics Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.